One of the easiest ways to color in an image is by using a layering stencil, and that's what I'm going to be doing today. Hi everyone, I'm Mindy Eggen and welcome to my channel. I would love it if you subscribed, liked this video, and shared it with your friends. I love it when companies come out with a coloring stencil to help color in an image. So if you are not very fond of using markers or colored pencils, this is going to make it super easy to color in the image. Mine happens to be a part of the Gina Designs card kit called The Good Life. So first I want to take a look at some of the supplies that I am going to be using today. I have the layering stencil and the stamp set Wishful Florals, which is a part of the card kit, but then I also have the Wishful Florals Polyglaze sheets. I have 14 karat transfer foil. And for inks, I plan on using medium lilac, dark lilac, key lime, lucky clover, and medium spruce. Those are going to be for my leaves. Then I also have some black onyx and Stormy Sky Ink. There are a few additional tools that I know I'll for sure be using, and that is going to be my Gina Designs tape runner and reverse tweezers. I have my Connect Blue glue in a fine tip bottle and a repositionable tape. I also have my detail blending brushes and mini blending brushes from Gina Designs, and then maybe a few other supplies here and there. Now, one of the first things I'm going to do is stamp out the images that I think I'm going to be using on my card front. I have a piece of layering weight white cardstock here that's cut to 5.5 by 8.5 from Gina Designs, and I placed it in my Misti tool. Now, this is probably my most used technique when I'm going to be coloring in images using a stencil, and that is using a lighter color of ink first. I don't just jump right into a black ink. So in this case, I'm using Stormy Sky. Any type of light gray or even a light brown will work. Now, my biggest tip out of this is always make sure your cardstock is tucked down in that bottom left-hand corner. Or if you use your Misti the other way, just make sure your cardstock is tucked down in the corner so it's always going to be in that same position. Now, I don't need this to be a completely stamped image. I just need kind of the outlines of it. So if there are some parts that didn't stamp well, that's fine. I'm okay with that. I cleaned off my stamps. And another big tip is leave the stamps in your Misti. Leave them in place. One of the biggest reasons that I do this is because that way I'm not going to have to worry about smearing. So I'm not waiting for ink to dry. It seems like the lighter colors don't take so long to dry. So by doing it this way, I'm going to avoid getting any smearing. I put a little bit of repositionable tape on the back of the cardstock to secure it down to that glass mat I have, and now I'm going through the stencils. So for these particular stencils, they are all labeled in the bottom left-hand corner, and it'll say 1, 2, 3, and 4, and it's going to be very easy to line up your images. If you're not 100% sure, just kind of hover over the image. If it doesn't look like it's fitting, it probably doesn't. So in this case, for this floral that I'm working on now, I lined up the image. It's going to be in the top, top left-hand corner. And I just used some Post-it tape to kind of mask off my edges, and it's also going to secure the stencil onto my cardstock. I chose to use some lilacs today for my flowers, so I'm starting out with a mini blending brush and the medium lilac, and I'm really just going to, I kind of call it dusting. I'm just going to do a really light hand of ink over the open areas of the stencils, and it's not going to fill in the entire flower. Right now, it is just pieces of the flower. Before I remove this layer of the stencil, I brought in the dark lilac with a detail blending brush, started in the center of the flower and kind of blended about halfway up the petal. And then I did some dark color down towards the bottom of each of the buds. So that's just kind of adding a little bit of contrast to the flowers themselves. I'll remove that layer of the stencil and I'm going to bring in the second layer of the stencil, and it's going to fill in the other pieces of the flower. Now, as the video goes on, I will speed up some of my blending parts because I'm really going to be repeating the same thing over and over, but I will show you the reveals. So here for that second layer, again, for this particular image, it's in the top left-hand side of this stencil. Started with that medium lilac, added some detail with the dark, and I love how that came out. That kind of separation line between the two stencils really adds that detail to the flower. Now for the third layer of the stencil, this is going to be for my leaves and stems. So again, top left corner, I lined that up, held that down with the Post-it tape. I'm starting out with key lime ink. Now it might not look like key lime because I use that blending brush for a lot of different shades of green, but it's just a lighter shade of green. And then I came in with the Lucky Clover and added that little bit of contrast to that particular layer of the stencil. So I almost always use two colors on the last layer of the stencil. Now we moved on to the fourth layer of the stencil, the last one. This is adding some more detail, and I'm bringing in medium spruce. As I go along, I actually don't use Lucky Clover anymore. I really loved that dark contrast with the medium spruce, so I end up not using the Lucky Clover as much. So that had finished off at that bottom corner image that I stamped out. It's all completely colored in. So I'm going to move on to coloring in the rest of the images. So up on top here, I went back to the first layer of the stencil. Again, it's printed down in the bottom left-hand corner of the stencil, layer 1. And I'm just repeating the same technique and the same colors, starting out with that medium lilac and then adding that little bit of extra contrasting color with the dark lilac. For this image that has that open flower and then the two buds, you're always going to find the layering images or the layering areas for that particular image in the top right-hand corner. So as you go through the 4 different stencils, this particular image will always be in that top right corner. Same thing as you get to the leaves. The leaves for this image will be in the top right. And as I mentioned earlier, it's really very easy to line up. Just kind of turn your stencil and you'll be able to figure out exactly which one or which image it lines up with. So I am on the 4th layer of the stencil. And again, like I said too, I just jumped right into the medium spruce. I just kind of skipped that in-between color because that contrast just really stuck out. For this image down in my bottom right-hand corner on my cardstock is just the foliage. And that one, I just needed to jump right to the stencil 3 in my set because that's where the foliage is. Layers 1 and 2 has the flowers. Layers 3 and 4 have your foliage. So again, coming in with that key lime and then adding a little bit of contrast with the medium spruce. And I jumped up to the top. Since I was on layer 3 of the stencil, I just figured I might as well add the color to this other foliage that I had stamped out. You can never have too much foliage because it's a great filler piece for your flowers. Then bringing in stencil 4, so this is the last layer for each of the foliage pieces, and again using that medium spruce. Sometimes I was able to hold it down with my hand, other times I used the Post-it tape. The Post-it tape is really my security net because in case I get a little too overzealous with my blending, at least I'm not going to get any ink on the rest of my card. But you can see where the detail blending brushes really help focus in on those small areas. Now I have my other large image to color in, and you're probably wondering, Mindy, where is that on my stencil? Well, here's what you do. You're going to clean your stencil. So I'm just using a rag and some rubbing alcohol, and I want to make sure I am cleaning off the front and the back of the stencil. Then what I'm going to do is make sure that all of them are in order. So I'm making sure that the etching is in that bottom left-hand corner, and I'm going to put them in order of 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, once I have those in that correct order, I'm going to take them and flip them over. So I'm going to place those just off on the side there, flipping each layer over. Once I have that, I'm going to start pulling them out as layer 1, 2, 3, and 4. So really, to color in this next image, you're going to use the other side of the stencil. That was just kind of my way of organizing my stencils. But to get this other image, the exact same image, just flipped, you need to just use the back half of your stencil. And I'm just showing you the reveals because I used the exact same technique and the exact same colors for all of the flowers and the leaves to finish off that image. Everything is colored in, so I'm going to bring my Misti back out, which I left everything in place. I'm going to make sure that my cardstock is tucked down in that bottom corner, and then I'm going to ink up the images with the Gina K Designs Black Onyx Ink. If you wanted a more whimsical look, you could leave your images just like this. It kind of gives it a no-line look, but if you want to bring all of that detail kind of back and front and center, then you could bring this in and stamp them in the black ink. So I did stamp these images twice, and I could tell that my ink was still wet because the centers were kind of shiny. So I'm going to just use my heat tool to dry that. Also included in the Good Life kit are the coordinating dies to die cut out all of these images. So I pulled them out and I'm grabbing the dies that I need to cut out the images. So I have the 2 large flowers, the foliage, and then that smaller flower. Now, one of the exciting new products this month is the Intri-Cut Magnetic Platform Set. I am so excited for this. So what you have is you have this base platform that is magnetic. It looks a little funky, but that is your magnetic piece. Then we have this cutting mat. So one side says this is not a cutting surface. It is the magnet that attaches onto the platform. And this is plate C. So you'll always want to cut into that gray mat. And then you have a clear cutting plate. So I am taking my cardstock, I'm placing it on top of that gray mat, mat C or plate C, and everything, this is so nice. My dies are sticking to this. It's holding them in place, but I'm still going to use Post-it tape. Again, it's kind of my security net. And also I move around a lot. I have to move my plates to bring in my die cut machine. And so I like to hold it in place with the Post-it tape so it doesn't shift. But that magnetic plate is so helpful in helping line up your dies. Now I'm bringing in the Intri-Cut die cut machine, getting my plates opened up, and then I can stick this all right on top and run it through. One thing I noticed is I had to dial back my pressure a little bit. So I'm still on the dial setting die cut, but I no longer have it set at 0. I actually loosened it a little bit. So if your plates aren't going through right away, try loosening it. Which is really weird, honestly, because it's the same width as the original platform and plate system, but for whatever reason, I needed to loosen it. So give that a try if you struggle at first, but it die cut out beautifully. Some of these images are, falling right out of the die, which is wonderful. And others I needed to grab a craft pick and help kind of pick them up off of that cutting mat. Off screen, I had foiled my sentiments. Now this is the Wishful Florals Polyglaze, which is sold separately from the kit. And I used the 14 karat, the 14 karat fancy foil to do my foiling. And I'm using the coordinating die from the kit to die cut out my sentiments. You have one for the Wishing You, and then you have the coordinating die for all of the smaller sentiments. When I do my die cutting, I almost always die cut an extra set. So I actually have 2 more wishes or Wishing You that I die cut out of white cardstock. And I also went ahead and die cut extra images for my flowers out of just plain white cardstock. And I do that so I can layer this up to get just a little bit of dimension and stability. Because sometimes I want just a little bit of lift to things, but maybe not necessarily so much with foam squares. So that little bit of extra cardstock really helps. I use my reverse tweezers, of course, and also my Connect glue that I have in a fine tip bottle. And I'm working on a media mat that's just going to catch the excess glue, and the excess glue is really easy to clean off of that mat. I played around a lot off screen on how I wanted to arrange the front of my card. And then I do have a side folding card base I created, but before I do that, I just could not help myself and wanted to add some ink blending to the background. Adding those florals to white cardstock would look really beautiful too, but if you know me, you know I can't resist adding ink blending. So I'm starting with a piece of layering weight white cardstock that's cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And I'm using some medium lilac. I'm starting in, that's actually going to be my top left-hand corner. And I'm bringing it kind of at a diagonal across my cardstock and having it fade off into white. And then I'm bringing in the dark lilac to add that little bit of contrast in that top corner. So this is how it's going to look when it's actually down on my card front. Is the darkest color is going to be in the top left, and it'll kind of fade off as it gets down to the bottom right. I like to break up my ink blended backgrounds with splatter. So I'm bringing in some white paint and a couple drops of water. I'm going to mix those two together and just bring in a fine paintbrush to add white splatters to the background. Of course, adding splatters is always optional and just something that I personally love to do. To help speed the drying process along, I'm bringing in my heat tool to dry those splatters so that way I can get this added to my side folding card front. So I'm adding tape runner to the top of my card base, and then I always kind of start in that bottom left-hand corner, line that up with the edge, and then press down. Then I can start arranging. Now, I should have taken a picture of my original arrangement because the flowers are so similar. I couldn't remember what I had in which direction. Either way, they were all great arrangements. This is just the one I ended up deciding to go with, and I'm using tape runner to add each of these. My kind of, what do I want to say, design point, I guess, in this is I wanted that bottom right-hand corner to kind of be open, so almost like the florals are ending at that diagonal point. That was kind of my thought in this card design, so to speak. And then having these sentiments kind of down in that bottom right-hand corner, but I really like when my sentiments overlap the image. So because I have my flowers with that extra piece of cardstock there, it was pushing it up a little bit and my sentiment was not laying flat. So I am taking some really thin foam squares and adding it to the right-hand side of Wishing You. And when that overlaps with that little bit of layered cardstock, it is nice and flush. It's all flat on the front there. And I'm also taking those thin foam squares and adding them to the smaller sentiment as well. I'm going to add some liquid glue to my sentiment and also those foam squares. That's going to give me just a little bit of wiggle room if I need to straighten that out. I'll do the same thing with my smaller sentiment, is just remove the backing of those foam squares and place that right underneath the Wishing You. So it's going to say Wishing You Happiness. Then I can just flip this over and I'm going to use my recoil scissors to trim off any of the excess that was hanging off the edge of the card. So that's going to complete my card. I'm not going to add any embellishments to it because I have that subtle texture in the background with the splatters, little bit of the flash with the foil, and then those beautifully colored in images using that coordinating stencil. That stencil makes things so super quick. All of the supplies used in today's video will be linked down below in the video description and over on my blog. Thank you all so much for joining me, and I'll see you again soon.